G'day guys, it is Jake from the Hoops Crew just chiming in with a quick video post trade and free agency period. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you absolutely sunk your teeth into the trade and free agency period. I know Paul churned out some great content during that time, but today I want to take a look at a little bit of an off-season sort of fantasy scenario. So I watch a lot of VFL footy, covering the VFL Cats for the Hoops Crew on Patreon. And there's a player who has come across my radar a couple of times, and his name came to the fore again after the Cats failed to lock up Rowan Marshall via trade with the Saints. So today we're going to talk a little bit about Southport Sharks ruckman Brayden Crossley. Now, I want to preface all of this by saying I don't necessarily think this will happen. There's some reasons why I think it could be a good idea and why it also might not be a great idea. But it's the off season, in the men's competition. We're nearing November. So I just wanted to entertain this, get a discussion going around it, particularly because Geelong have, picked up a player like Sean Manor in recent times and pretty expertly converted him into a valuable piece of their AFL team. So before we jump into this, make sure you hit that like, the subscribe button so you get all of the coverage here on the Hoops Crew. So Brayden Crossley, 26 years old. He might look like he is, 39 or 40 and perhaps playing footy in the 1980s. But this is a guy who has only just turned 26 in August. So don't let the moustache fool you. He's a ruckman for the Southport Sharks. I've watched him a few times when he's played the Cats. Now, why am I entertaining this conversation? Well, as I said, Rowan Marshall did not get his way and get to the Cats. So Geelong's plan of maybe resetting the age at the ruck position in terms of an experienced player suffered a bit of a blow there in dealing with the Saints. So no Rowan Marshall. Stanley of the Reese variety has re-signed. But, he is now well into his mid-30s. Behind him, the Cats are faced with playing either Mark Blixarves, who I think is a pretty good solution, but let's face it, we would probably like to be able to play him in other areas of the field, given his diversity of skill set. Then it's maybe Sam De Koning, pulling him out of defence to go and play in the ruck. And then after that, you're really down to untried or unproven youngsters. Toby Conway has the talent, but he's really struggled to get on the field ever since he's been at the Cattery. You've got Mitch Edwards, who looks talented but raw and has had his own injury issues. And then you've got Joe Pike, who has looked the rawest of all of them and probably has looked the furthest from an AFL debut, despite being the healthiest out of those youngsters. The draft this year is talked about as being very thin, a little bit talent poorer than usual. That's per the experts, not me. So this is one of the reasons why I'm entertaining this conversation around a fantasy scenario in which we go and pick up Brayden Crossley. So Crossley was a graduate of the Gold Coast Academy system. I'm reading this from an article by Riley Beveridge from a few years ago. He was 198 centimetres, 101 kilo ruckman, and he was recruited to the Suns with pick number 52 in the 2017 draft. He played 10 senior matches in his maiden season with the Suns, but didn't feature for Gold Coast in 2019. He was delisted at the end of the campaign. Why? Well, the former Gold Coast ruckman, Brayden Crossley, accepted a 12-month anti-doping suspension. He tested positive to a banned substance, cocainum, midway through last season, and that's reading from an article back in 2019. So I'm talking about, 5-6 years ago is when this went down. So he accepted the 12-month ban. Now, since then, he's been back on deck. He declared again for the AFL draft, I believe, maybe it was after the 12-month ban, never got picked up, and he's been on Southport's roster since. Now, the first thing I want to talk about with Brayden Crossley is the type of player he is. He's big and strong. Is he the most mobile? Absolutely not. So he's not as mobile as your Reece Stanley. He's not as mobile as Mark Blixarves. I think in terms of that, he's similar. If you've watched Joe Pike, he's more of a straight up and down, strong tap work ruckman. He's very good around the contest, but he's not going to be the sort of player that you can roll onto a wing or something like you do with Blix halves. He just doesn't have that mobility, but he is very strong and a very good ruckman. Really high tackle count for a ruck too, which we'll get to shortly. One of the things I like about him is his durability. From 2021 to now, he has played 88 of a possible 92 games for Southport's VFL team. So he has been on the park for Southport in 95.6% of possible games he could have played for the Sharks. So this is not a big guy who is stricken by injury often. He's durable. He's still in a really nice age range in his mid to late 20s at age 26. And he's not just durable. He's also performed really consistently across those seasons, those 5 years. From 2021 to now, he has averaged 15.3 disposals, 3.8 marks, 5.3 tackles. He has a really high tackle count for a ruckman and 33.6 hitouts per game in those 88 matches. Now, against Geelong, when he's played us 3 times in those seasons. He has been dominant. He's averaged 19 touches, 5.7 marks, 6.3 tackles, 43 hitouts per game, and 5.3 clearances per match. So he has definitely had the best of the Cats whenever we've played him in the VFL. And maybe that's where some of my bias around his value comes from. Sometimes a player destroys your team, and when they're available, you go, let's bring that guy in. Grand finals, he's played in 3 of them. So he's been consistent over his whole Sharks career. But when it comes to grand finals, he's also stepped up and performed. Unfortunately for him, his personal performances haven't been able to get the Sharks over the line. They've played in 3 grand finals, 2022, 2024, and 2025, and lost them all. But he has averaged 13.6 disposals, 3.3 marks, 12.7 tackles, 59.7 hitouts, and 3 clearances per game in those VFL grand finals. So he has really played his position quite well in those games. Now, there are other clubs who have sniffed around, and one in particular sniffed around a lot in 2025. It was the Western Bulldogs, and the Dogs had him trialling for an extended stint in their preseason. He ultimately missed a place on their final list. He played in the match sim against Essendon and performed very well in the ruck. However, he did lose out around the ground to his more agile Essendon counterpart. This is per the match report from Sarah Black. So where does all this information put us around Brayden Crossley? Where do I land on this? As I said, it's a bit of a fantasy scenario. I don't think that this will happen. And I guess I'm exploring whether I think it should happen or it would be a good move on the Cats' part. So let's look at the positives. Okay, he's the current co-captain of Southport. So this is a person who has undergone the personal challenge of losing his AFL career due to this anti-doping suspension he had to serve. He has not been able to get back on an AFL list. The closest he has been is with that trial with the Dogs. But he's considered a leader at Southport. He's extremely durable. As I mentioned, 88 of a possible 92 games for the Sharks in his last 5 seasons. So he's worked hard to get back to this position where he's even been on the radar of an AFL list. He's not over the hill. He's in a good age bracket at age 26. It's a thin draft. It is a thin draft. So that's another, when you talk about using a pick on a player like this, if you had to, I'm not sure. The Dogs, I suppose you can pick them up as, is it a supplementary pick or whatever it's called? I think that's what the Dogs had him on their list as last year. Someone in the comments can probably fill you in on the specifics there. And the other thing is that Geelong need health at ruck. They need healthy depth. Now, yes, we do have Reece Stanley. Yes, we do have Toby Conway. Yes, we've got Mark Blixarves. And yes, we've got Edwards, Pike, and in a pinch, De Koning. But the problem with the out-and-out rucks, who are Stanley, Conway, Edwards, and Pike, is that Stanley is getting towards the end of his career. He probably doesn't really, it's not best for him if he plays every game of a season. Toby Conway is the most talented ruck on Geelong's list. Hands down, the most talented, pure ruckman on Geelong's list. But he has not been healthy, and it's been an almost impossible task to get him on the field. So there's a massive question mark there. Mitch Edwards, very raw, a very like skilled and explosive and interesting kind of athletic package to go with his ruck work. But he's really raw and hasn't even been debuted yet at AFL level. And he's had his own injury concerns. And then, as I said, Joe Pike, the fittest of all of them in terms of the youngsters, but super raw, even at VFL level. Like I would say, you know, there are games where he looks like he's really developed. And then there are games where, you know, he gets beaten by the VFL rucks, guys like Crossley, etc. The dudes who are VFL lifers. So I think Crossley fits an interesting age demographic for the Cats. He's durable. He's got a lot of experience, even if it's not at AFL level. So in some ways, I look at him in terms of the narrative around him and the body of work he's put together in the VFL. It is a little bit like your Sean Manor, who is just clearly too good for the VFL level. But will someone give him a chance, and can he take it at AFL level? So I think all of that would be a massive positive for the Cats, to get a ruckman in that peak age range, who's got experience, who's got leadership qualities, who's had life experience and had to... I think there's something really valuable in drafting and adding guys to your list who maybe thought their AFL dream was over, but then they get offered that second opportunity. I think it drives a significant amount of sort of work ethic within the squad. I think you look at guys who came to the Cats a little bit older, Tom Stewart, Sean Manor, Podsy Adley, all those guys. I think they approach it with kind of a more balanced mindset, perhaps, than guys who come in at 18 and haven't really experienced a lot of life outside footy. So all of those things I think are the positives. The obvious question mark is around his mobility. That was the note from the match report when he played the match sim against the Dons, was that he was exposed a bit around the ground. And let's be honest, there is at times an athletic difference between, you know, the guys you're going up against at VFL level and the sort of players you're going to be playing at AFL level. So that's a legitimate question mark. And that may be the thing that keeps him off an AFL list. We know how much more mobile players of all positions have to be, you know, in 2025 and 2026 in the AFL. You only have to look at a guy like Jeremy Cameron, you know, a key forward who frequently is deployed by the Cats on a wing. He might even sometimes go, you know, on ball for a little bit. He's down in the back pocket. You know, it's not enough really probably to stand at the ruck contest anymore and just plod around the ground. So that is a big question mark. It's probably the biggest reason why it won't happen. But I wouldn't mind seeing the Cats just kick the tires on a guy like Brayden Crossley, because there are a lot of ticks in the positive column for him. It's just whether those question marks, and really I think the biggest one is around his mobility and athleticism, is that enough to cancel out all the positives? It probably is, but I'd be really happy if Geelong kicked the tires and got this guy in for a bit of a train-on sort of experience like what the Dogs did last year. I wouldn't even be unhappy if they spent some sort of later round pick to add him to their squad if that's the way they have to get it done. So, yeah, I find this interesting. I don't think it's likely to happen. I don't even know if it's on the Geelong's radar. But here in mid-October, it felt like something that was worth chatting about. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Would love to hear from you, whether you think it's an insane idea, whether you think it's half decent. Yeah, we love chatting footy with you here on the Hoops Crew. So thanks so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. And until next time, go Cats!